Today we'll be talking about how to bring Roslyn into custom application, particularly Code Auditor. Now I see one face who might be able to answer a few questions that I don't know about that product. So what is the agenda? First we'll look at what we had. Then I'll explain why we decided to have Roslyn in the application. And I'll tell you about a bit how it looked like when we were building that into the application. That's why Stairway to Heaven. The reason why I chose the title Stairway to Heaven is like, Stairway to Heaven is by many the greatest song ever written by musicians, but it's a devil's song in the back. So it's the same with Roslyn compiler. It's supposed to be the greatest thing that Microsoft put in the Visual Studio now, but it's quite tricky to use it, especially now. And then we'll do one really big demo, so you'll be able to see how this thing works in practice. And of course, a bit of pros and cons before we conclude the session. So as I mentioned, this talk is about using Roslyn in the real product. It's not another demo. It'll be, in the beginning, just the jump on the boat and see how fast we can go. But at the end, we'll end up with a demo how we can use Roslyn in Code Auditor and what it had to be done before I was able to use it there. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Danijel Malik. I am a Visual Studio ALM MVP. I recently joined ALM Rangers. At SSW, I work as a solution architect. I am the architect of Code Auditor now. I love a lot of these things related to ALM, Visual Studio, and I still cannot get used to that JavaScript is mainstream when it was forbidden in the browsers for years. So that's something I'm still suffering from. Okay, before we move on, I would like to show you how Code Auditor version 13.83 looked like, and then I'll explain what problems we had and why the solution wasn't good enough. So that's the old solution we had. It was quite okay for years, but as the languages evolved, we couldn't keep up with that, and we had a lot of regex rules built in that were not sufficient enough, and C# snippets were not okay, but we'll talk about that later. So as I mentioned, we had quite a lot of rules. There were 180 plus rules. 30 of them were false positives, so the rules were not good enough anymore. So there were things that we had to address. Now most of these rules were regex. How many of you know how to write regex? How many of you are fluent with regex? Only 2. And how many of you can write 6, 7, or 10 plus lines regex? Come on, Julian. I know you're the only one.
I know the problem of that.
That's why. Now the other thing is we had C#.
Why Julian is so good at regexes?
Yeah, I'll come to that part later. I'll show what are our rules currently in Code Auditor. The other thing we had is a lot of C# snippets, but it's hard to make them smart. It's really, really hard. The main reason why is because we cannot match across multiple files. And one example I can give you is I can have one file that has completely different name from the other one, and there are 2 partial classes inside, and one, for instance, I don't know, implement side is posable and the implementation is in the other one. And I cannot match that with regex or C# snippets, but with Roslyn I can do that. What we really had is quite good fundamentals, but ton of troubles as the languages evolved, as I mentioned. Now, Code Auditor 2014 is something we have published in, I think in August. And we have done pretty much a lot of work on the UI. We replaced how the rules are applied. So now we have multiple levels of severity. We have parallel processing in the back, so we're using all your cores. And all sort of things is happening there. We changed the UI, so the UI is completely different. We have integration with Team Foundation Server. And when you double click on the report, it will take you to Visual Studio. So plenty of things were done. But the biggest problem was the engine. And now that's what we are trying to change as well. Before we go to why I chose Roslyn, I want to know how many of you really know Roslyn. There were a few hands up before. Okay, you just heard about Roslyn. Have you played with it? No one has played with Roslyn before. Okay, let me first explain what Roslyn is. At Microsoft, what they had a problem with originally is that they have been building features for C# and VB. And there were guys coming from the C#, oh, we want to have that feature, it's in VB. And there were guys from VB side coming, oh, those guys in C#, they have those features, and Microsoft said, okay, it's enough. We'll build Roslyn, something that will serve you as compiler as a service. You will get all features in one or the other languages because they will be built exactly the same. And that's what Roslyn was created initially. Now then they decided to open it up as a compiler as a service, which means that they give us parsers and access, and we get syntax trees and a lot of features that are coming in, plus a lot of features that we can use in Visual Studio itself. I'll show you a few things later. Now the main reason why I chose Roslyn is, well, first of all, it'll be the next compiler in Visual Studio 2015. It's in by default, which means if Microsoft relied on that, we can rely on that too. Just as an unofficial information, they have built 36,000 applications using Roslyn now, and it works okay. So it's pretty much safe. And I have tested quite a lot of big things. Now the other thing is, as I mentioned, it provides me out-of-the-box parser and lexer, which means I don't have to deal with how the semantics and the syntax tree is looking in C#. All I have to care about is how do I get that out. And with regex rules, you can ask Julian, because he has built many of them. It's not really simple, but with Roslyn, well, it's not simple as well, but at least it's accurate. That's the main reason why I wanted to have Roslyn there. Maybe it should be put on top. And one, certainly not last, is that I can use it in a standalone product. That's something that's really valuable for me because I'm building a desktop app, which will eventually go to the server side, but let's leave this aside. Now, here's how, well, what Roslyn provides us. I don't know how good is that. Can you see it from the back? You probably cannot read, yeah. So the resolution is a bit small, but even if I resize the picture, it will be jacked. There are a lot of things that Roslyn provides. We won't dive into many of them. All we'll be looking at is parser, syntax trees, and Emit API. Those are the things I really cared about. All the rest are, well, they can be valuable, but it depends what do you want to build. The top line, language as a service, it's pretty much all of that stuff belongs to Visual Studio. I don't know, why would I need symbol API? Maybe if I was building something that was linking those assemblies and things like that. Now the other thing, as I mentioned, syntax trees. One of the things I really care about are workspaces. I'll explain a little bit later what it is. And what I can do now is that from Code Auditor, I can apply code fixes to the issues I find. So what happens if I find an issue, and I can just say double click on that one, it'll take you to Visual Studio and ask you to fix it by yourself. If I can find an issue, I can probably fix it as well. And before, I wasn't really able to do that, but now I can. And what I can really do is, with workspaces, I can do fixes across multiple solutions if I want in one go. Because I have a workspace, I can use multiple solutions and just apply the fix across all solutions, and I'm done. Now, one thing I really need when I'm getting through the code is a Roslyn Syntax Visualizer. That's the only tool that you have right now at disposal. The documentation is almost none, and Roslyn Syntax Visualizer is the only tool you can use to see how Roslyn sees the code and how it later transforms it to binary trees. You can get that tool if you install one of the v6 plugins. It's available on roslyn.codeplex.com. So there is a plugin that gives you Roslyn in Visual Studio. It works with VS 2013 as well. It's by default in VS 2015. And one of the plugins is Roslyn Syntax Visualizer. And that tool allows me, if I click somewhere here on code, the syntax tree here will change. And then I'll see what are the properties and what else I get. You'll be able to see that later as we go. One of the other options I have with that Roslyn Syntax Visualizer, if I right-click one of those nodes here in the tree, and there is one method that opens up the DGML, and I can see the entire syntax tree, how it looks like, if I want a better visualization. Okay, now, as I mentioned before the pane, I want to show you something what is really problematic now in Code Auditor, and I'll jump to my VM. which means that I have to duplicate my screen. Is it coming over? It's not, because I think that that's something that shouldn't happen. I should end this one. And now, because visual, we have to restore the virtual machine. That's not too good, but if you want to duplicate screen from the VM, it all of a sudden freezes for some reason. So we'll need a minute to restore the VM back to the state where it was.
Tell us about the bridge then.
Sorry?
Where's the bridge?
What bridge? Oh, I normally take the wallpapers down from interfacelift.com. It's a really good site. You can get all sort of sizes wallpapers, which is quite nice. She gave me, you're probably the right person to tell. You're from there. Okay, let me go out of the VM now and duplicate it from here. Okay, I reckon that you can see it now. Let me just zoom in a little bit. That's not a demo I wanted to show you. Let me go here. And what I'll do here, that's the Code Auditor 2014. Julian, it's completely different from what you were used to know. Thank you very much. So let's call it just a job. And what I'll do here, I'll just apply one of the rules. Are all disabled? Oh no, here we have to apply a new file. Sorry, let me just apply it. I'll do it on a single file. This one will be fine. Yep, that's good. Okay, I'll get rid of all the rules, and I just want to show you one that's problematic. It's string.empty. If I apply that rule to that file, let me just finish out the job and execute that job. Now what you can see here, it reported a few problems, and we have marked this rule as known false, that it has known false positives, which means that it can find something that's normally not a problem. And now if I double click that file, well, there are two instances opened. That's why it will take me to the first one. As you can see here, that rule found that I should be using string.empty here in optional parameters. But as we know, you cannot use string.empty in optional parameters, right? That's something that's not really okay. And if I double click the next one, okay, it found this one as well. And if I go here, the third one, that one is okay, right? We could use string.empty here. And the fourth one, come on. The fourth one here is okay. But how about this one? This one was skipped. I could use string.empty here as well, right? So that's one of the things where we had problems with, and we wanted to address those issues. Now before I move to that, I'll explain how we actually started. It's back good. So my Stairway to Heaven, the Devil's Song, first of all I had to add the new engine. Because what we had before, it was used for C# snippets, regex, wildcards, and something else, yes?
What's Code Auditor?
Code Auditor is a tool we have built at SSW that analyzes your code. It's not as powerful as ReSharper, but it's more like we put in the rules that are kind of best practices, while ReSharper gives you something else, and we check things that ReSharper normally don't. So we had to add a new scanning engine. That for itself, well, this thing for itself wasn't that difficult. There were other problems, and that one is probably the biggest one. The way the rules are applied now are per file. But with Roslyn, what I can do, I can apply them on the solution level, I can apply them on the project level, I can apply them on the file level, which kind of makes sense. Sometimes you just want to look at what's happening on the entire level, not just on the file. And revamping that stuff is a bit of a nightmare, because we had to completely go back, change the way the entire logic works, and look from it from a different perspective. Now, the third thing is we have to revamp a lot of rules. Some of them are obsolete, as I mentioned. Some of them are useless. And I'm pretty sure we'll add new rules, because now we'll have a really powerful platform that can allow us to do so. One thing I really didn't like is to deploy extra assemblies. Now, this might sound something little, but when you have to deploy extra 10 assemblies, your package size is double. And from the user perspective, if the size doubles, for no good and known reason, they'll go, oh, what would I have done with that? Plus, you have to look at those assemblies. You have to mention those things in the license. So it's something that normally people don't care, but I'm not really happy when I have to add multiple things into solutions. And the last thing is Roslyn limitations. I'll be touching that very soon. So here's how it looks from the solution perspective. We added a new engine, and those are new assemblies we had to add. It's quite a few of them. They're quite heavy. So the next thing we had to touch is this dialog. And does anyone notice straight away what is the problem here? Julian, you could know.
Which field?
Oh, I actually opened drop-down intentionally. I can make it like this. There is a big problem with this drop-down.
You can't multi-select?
Correct. So Adam said you can't multi-select. And the reason is yes, we can apply rules for MVC or for SQL script, but sometimes you have rules that fit into multiple different languages or multiple different solutions. That's what we cannot do here, and that's what I mentioned before. So this drop-down is gone. Now the other thing is a very long list of issues we have to fix. Some of them are disabled by default when you install the application, just because they need to be improved. You can turn them on if you feel like, but by default they're turned off, and that's something we had to address. Now the last thing, as I said, Roslyn has some limitations. And the biggest two limitations are that it just works with C# and VB. Kit, was that a question? Kit just put his leg up, so I want to. So the biggest two limitations are, it works just with C# and VB. Well, as we know, a lot of work is now done with JavaScript, HTML. We don't have any options to check for CSS unless with regex. So this is kind of, it is okay that we have something for those two languages, but as a user that uses Roslyn, I would wish to have a bit more powerful platform from where I can do a lot of things on other languages like TypeScript, JavaScript, and so forth. So, sorry?
Is that a direction that Microsoft are headed?
The thing is that Roslyn is, so the question was if there is any direction from Microsoft. Is that correct?
Yeah, are they planning on supporting it?
Yeah, so the question was if Microsoft is planning to support any other language. The thing is, it's not that simple, because C# and VB are pretty much similar, and they have built more than just a parser and lexer and all those things that are in. This is the compiler, and they provide a lot of things by default. Now, what I noticed, it's a week old, is that TypeScript is using Roslyn as well, so that's something I'm very happy about. Initially, I thought that there is no support, but now that's in. But I spoke with Anders last week at MVP Summit, and he said that they don't have any plans to add any other languages. It is what it is indeed. They had a lot of issues to bring it to Visual Studio. They had to give away a few tools. So Roslyn is a big beast, and I don't think that they'll change that anytime soon. But I'm happy to see what is inside. Can you give him a microphone? I didn't hear the question.
At least they can apply JS-int on this standard, which is currently in JavaScript. Why don't they do that?
I don't know. I'm not the right guy to answer that question, but I can ask. I was in touch with the guy who put Roslyn into Visual Studio, and maybe he could have something great to tell. So one thing that I found very frustrating is lack of documentation. As I mentioned, there's almost none of the documentation there, and apart from Roslyn Syntax Visualizer, there is nothing else. Okay, are you ready to see the demo? That's the biggest part. So what we're going to do here, and I have to kill the presentation first. I have to be careful this time. Okay, so here I have one application that is pretty smart. Oh, sorry, this is a file. Let me open the application. It's this one. So this application is super smart. It analyzes itself and looks for the things that are broken, especially string.empty. So when I analyze that file, what I would expect, here nothing looks bad, right? There is no empty quotes so far. But down here I have that print message method that has empty quotes here and empty quotes here and down here and down here, right? Nothing too hard to understand, okay? Now what I would expect from the tool is that whenever it scans that code, can you see it from the back, by the way? Okay, let me just zoom that in a little bit. Better? Okay, good. So I wanted to use the Present On plugin for Visual Studio. Unfortunately, I'm running it on Visual Studio 2015 and the plugin is not there. So I have to use Alt Zoom functionality. So what I would expect from the analyzer to do is that it will report this line, and it would skip those two empty quotes because they're valid, right? So if I run that code and if everything works fine, we should see those problems coming up. Now let me run that. And as we can see, there are three. Now if I go here, let me bring Visual Studio on the other half. Okay, so here we have line 49 and the character is 37. If I go here and click in this one, okay, it would be good if I had line numbers here as well. Languages, let me turn on the line numbers. Okay, so this is line 49 and the character is, when it starts, it's 38. It's zero based, so what I should do here, I have a little bug. And I should do +1 because everything is zero based. So when I run it again, it will show correct one. So let me go here again and resize that a little bit. So what I see, it starts at the character 38 and line is 49. Let's look at the other two. It's line 54, character is 28. That's correct, right? It's a little bit small, but unfortunately I cannot zoom that now. And this is 56 and the character is 35. So as we have seen, it found the correct empty quotes. Now how did I do that? First of all, writing that bit of code here that does that magic wasn't really that simple. So what I'll do now, I'll show you how Roslyn sees the code. I'll open the syntax visualizer and I'll click somewhere down here in code. Now if I click into this guy, let me open that again. That's the syntax tree. that Roslyn sees it. And if I click somewhere else, look at how fast it is. Bam. That's how fast it parses the code and knows exactly where I am. Now from this point on, what I had to do, I had to find out which of those empty quotes are optional parameters. And the simplest way to do that was to click in here and say, oh, okay, now I'm in string literal token. I have to look up the way, and when I click in the tree, it'll highlight the code that this tree is looking after. And if I come up to the parameter, now I know, okay, this string literal token, if it has parent of parent parameter, then that's fine. And well, the better way to look at this, that's how I found this one. So I have that syntax token parameter. I'll come back later to that one. And if it's parent and parent of parent, let me show that again, because that's the tricky part. Oh, sorry, this one. So when we have that string literal token, we have one parent, second parent, third parent. If the third parent is parameter, and if this is the empty string, that means that is an optional parameter. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, how did I get that one? I went through the entire tree. To get a tree, you just have to read the file, parse the text using the C# syntax tree, and then you get the entire root. And from the root, you can select specific tokens which have specific row count. And that row count, it's really hard to get, but you can get it from here, from the properties. And if I click this guy again, I will see that the row count is 8,511. What does that number mean? I had no idea. By coincidence, I found that there is enum in the back, which I can use and cast it to int. But for some reason, it displays different number here. Don't ask me why. But that's the correct number for that row count. And it might be just that it's a Visual Studio 2015, that it doesn't display that correctly. But for some reason, it displays a different number here. Sorry?
One's hex, the other's octal or something.
Yeah, probably. Okay. So the biggest thing here is you have to understand what the row count that token is. If you know the row count, then you can easily get it back. And if I know that this is a string literal token, and if that token that I found doesn't have any value, then it's empty quote. Does that make sense? Only one agrees with that. What's unclear? Let me start over. So what we have to look at when we parse the entire tree in the file, we will look after empty quotes. After string expressions, whatever is in double quotes. It could be this one, it could be this one, it could be anything there. But we'll be interested only in those that are empty. That's how I get empty quotes. And once I know that, all I have to do, I have to just look through that list that I just got back and check if that parent, third parent in a row, as I mentioned before, is parameter syntax. And if that's the case, then I can skip it. Otherwise, it's an empty quote, and that one needs a fix. So that's the way how I found those empty quotes here, and this is the way how it works. Now, one thing I forgot to do here is to do it for Visual Basic. So with Roslyn, I can target two languages at the same time. And now I'll show you how we can do it for Visual Basic. What I'll do here, I'll add a new project. And let's go for Visual Basic, class library. And because I'm super good with Visual Basic, I'll just say vb.net optional parameters. I think this one will be good. So what I'll do now, I'll just copy a snippet from the page that has optional parameters there, and then I'll change my code in the application so that I can analyze Visual Basic file as well. Sorry?
Could you use the Bing add-in code checking?
So the question was if I could use the Bing Visual Studio extension for that, and my answer to that is no. It has a long way to go before it will be really useful. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just copy that snippet and I'll put it in here. I'll change a few things. So what I'll do, I'll remove the values here, and if I change that, that's fine, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's modify the code. I'll go back here to my program, and first of all, I will look after, I'll get another file. I'll comment out this one. So what I'll do, I'll just go another level up so that I know where my source is. Use that, what's that class library? And this one is called class1.vb. Okay, so here what I'll check first is what the extension is. I'll say path get extension for that particular path. And if that path is C# extension, I'll just say extension equals .cs. Then it's a CS file, otherwise it's Visual Basic. What I have to do here in the tree, based on that, what language I'll be using, I have to use the correct syntax tree parser. So I'll go to Microsoft, Code Analysis. This time I go to Visual Basic, and I'll use Visual Basic syntax tree, and I'll say parse. Oh, there's a new method, parse file. I haven't seen that one before. So this is parse source code. So based on the file extension, I'll assume that's right. I'll parse either the syntax tree as a C# or as a Visual Basic. Now I'll get rid of this one. This one is not needed anymore. And now the biggest part here is what I have to change is what row kind I'm using. So that row kind is different for C# and for Visual Basic. So I'll remove that one and I'll call it row kind. So this is row kind. And I'll do the same here. If this is C#, I will do it that way. Otherwise, I'll use Microsoft.codeanalysis.visualbasic. And this is string. What's the other one? Where is it living? It's living syntax kind. Here it is. String literal token. Now, what did I miss here? I have to cast it to int. All good now? All good. Now when I have a correct row kind, it'll find the correct empty quotes, and all I have to do here, I have to check that the correct parameter syntax is being used, otherwise it'll be used for C#. So another thing I have to do here, I'll copy that line of code, and I'll say if is C#, then I'll do this, otherwise I'll do the same thing here. And I'll just change that to Visual Basic. So I'll go to Microsoft.codeanalysis.visualbasic syntax, and there we have parameter syntax. So now if I run this code, I would expect that it will find this line of code, but not this one, right? Okay, let's see if it works. And it doesn't. Okay, that's good. It didn't find the correct file. I'll just copy and paste the file name. Maybe I just didn't use the right one. Let me just get the full path. So I'll just say that path Yep, that should be good. And let me add that one here. Bam. And I found, let me see if I can zoom that in. It doesn't really work the way I want it.
Move the mouse up a bit, it'll go.
Ah, here we go. Now I just have to rerun that again. Here we go. We found at line 3, character 21, there was an empty quote. If we go back and check it in code, how do I get rid of this one now? Didn't really work. Line number 3, character 21. I don't know if you can see it from the bottom here, but it says 21. That's how we found it. Now that's one way how we can use Roslyn in our application. But that's simple. It's really simple how to do that. The biggest problem comes if you have to bring that code into your solution that's already existing. And what I want to show you now is how I can do that with Code Auditor. So as you remember from before, we had some pain because we have a rule there that's not working. And I'll update that rule using Roslyn, and I'll show you how we can compile and execute that code on the fly, bring it in the application, and execute it there. So I'll go to my solution. Now here in the business layer, I have jobs. Sorry, no, where's that one? Roslyn engine. Here we have it. What we had to do, we had to implement the new engine. And implementation itself, it wasn't that difficult. More of a problem was that Microsoft kept changing it. Now what we do here, we have a rule engine. It's the same interface as it is for the old one. Now this is unrefactored code without all those changes that were working in the back. And what I do here, I get the data from all those providers that can scan. So we have pending changes scanner, we have Visual Studio Solution scanner, folder scanner, and so forth. So all those scanners you can put into one job and say, I want to scan everything here. And then I get all this data here through the rule engine data. And from that data, I can just tell, okay, what files will I get? I'm using some caching here. But if that rule is Roslyn, then I can proceed. If it's not, I'll just skip it. Now the biggest problem here is whatever you're executing, that it's the code you compiled. If you compile it once and you load it in your app domain and you do it the second time, what will happen? Normally you get an exception for that. And when you get an exception in your app domain, you're done. You just have to close your application. I mean, if you try to execute whatever from that point on, you'll always get an exception. And that's why you have to execute whatever you compiled and loaded on the fly in a separate app domain. Now this part that's here, sandbox isolate, that's what it does, this line of code. It seems pretty simple, but what it does in the back, it creates a new app domain. It's using dependency injection container, and dependency injection container will create a new instance on that app domain, execute the code there, and return the result onto this site, which requires some marshalling and all those things that are in the back. So that isolate is fairly complex thing. You have to just go there, create a new app domain, give it specific permission set, what can happen on that app domain, and so forth. And when you have that, you have to create an object there, unwrap it back, and call that instance on that class. And all those classes that I'm using, have to be managed, serializable, and have to be marshaled by ref. So that's something that's required when you're dealing with cross-domain communication. And that's what's happening here. That's the only way to do it now. I believe that that part is fairly complex, so that's why I have this simple isolate method that can be used by anyone, and you can just say, okay, I'm executing this somewhere else. It looks like a regular lambda expression, and I can do whatever I want with it and return back the result, so that's what I care about. Now in the process file, there is no super magic. What I do, I grab the snippet that is written in C#, I compile it on the fly. If I cannot compile it, I'll just bail out. if I can compile it, I'll create an assembly from that bytes that were returned from the compile, and then I'll look through the assembly and check for specific classes that implement one interface. Now that's the only way to communicate with the outside code if you don't know it. You just require some contract, and the one who wants to jump into your application has to implement that contract. And that's what I did here with that Roslyn snippet. So that interface is fairly simple. It has one method check. What I'll provide here, what this should be called path. It's a file path, a list of other files, and then where I want that rule or snippet to store the result of whatever was happening there. So once I find those classes that implement that interface, I know how to use them, and I create an instance of that type, and then I just call check method on it. Here I provided just an empty list because that's still in progress, so Roslyn is still in progress. And once that executes, it'll store the result here. So that's how it, in theory, it works. Now, if I run that application, I can just show you how compile looks like here. So what I do, I give the compiler all the assemblies I know, so I don't want any surprises there. Maybe that's not the best thing, but it works for now. I give the compiler all the assemblies, and I just, when creating the new compiler, I give him the option that I want to compile this as a DLL. By default, it's an exe, which means that Roslyn gives you an option to compile your code wherever it is and put out an exe and execute that exe or do whatever you want with that. So there are a couple of options. I can show you what it is here. So we have console application. We can create a DLL. It's a net module. We can create a Windows application and all sort of things. So in this case, all I'm interested in is a dynamic link library. And then I just provide him the syntax tree. I got the syntax tree from the source code that I just loaded from the file. And what I do then later, I just compile that on the fly. That's why image is so important to me. And if the code is okay, then I provide back that byte array, and that's pretty much it. That's a really quick drive through what we have in code. How does that work in the application? Let me run that. Is everything clear so far? Yeah, go for it, Michael.
So, are you compiling the whole project, or can you compile just small parts?
It's just a snippet. So the question was, can we compile? Am I compiling the entire project, or am I compiling just a snippet? So the rules that I'm using inside are simple snippets, and I compile those snippets on the fly. And I'll show you how. So if I go here to rules, and I'll look for that string.empty. So there is one Roslyn rule that's already there. If I double click that one, I have some implementation there in code. And that implementation is not simple. I'll explain to you later why that's the case. It used to be, sorry, I want this one. Let's make it 22. Is it big enough at the back? Okay. So that's how I put in a snippet that I compile and that checks for those. Let me get rid of that word wrap. So that snippet is almost the same copy as we have built before in the console application. I could update it and do the same. The problem with that is that I have to implement that interface, and we have to expose that as an SDK, and the people will have to know how to use that method if they wanted to build their own rules. In the past, Microsoft had a scripting engine in Roslyn, which allowed me to make those rules a little bit simpler, but it has been removed. They'll bring it back later. That's what I heard, but I'm not 100% sure when. So that's the code we have built before, and now it's living here inside that snippet. All I did here around is that I just implemented that method and put it in a simple class, and that's pretty much it. Now if I go and show you, well, first question is it that difficult to maintain? Great. You can write all the rules now. I think that that is very difficult to maintain because not everybody understands. But let me show you something else. Who can tell me what this is doing? See, that's the problem. Even Julian can remember that. But he has probably built that rule. It is a bit difficult, and that's the main problem we have. First of all, we don't know how to maintain those rules. Second of all, they don't work really well. So that snippet there, it is hard to maintain, but it's working, and at least it's understandable. How many of you understood the demo I did before? A few of them, third of the room. I wish that everybody would understood it, but I believe that the session is a little bit complex for everyone. Sorry?
Stick that in Espresso. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this one? This snippet? Yeah, well, I could do that. But it's still, if I...
That might text wrap it up, like make a lot.
Exactly. If I have to do that, I have to go there and check what's happening and then use some stuff. Well, if I read the code, I know exactly what's happening there, pretty much. Now, what I'll do here, I'll use Roslyn in the code, and you'll see how I used the code we have built before. It's just that it's in the rule already, and how it works for me now. So here I have another job, and that job already contains that rule. Now let's see the results. Remember from before? We had those 4 that are coming from regex, and there are 3 that are coming from the new rule. Now let's see how accurate this one was. Let me double click on this one. Bam. Is that the correct line? It is. How about this one? Good. And here we have the third line. So we have a very accurate engine now that understands C# and VB in the details, and I can use that in my product to build better rules for Code Auditor. So that's the big thing that we wanted to have, and now we can build everything on top of that. Did you like it?
Yep. Given that you've got the
You think it's useful?
Yeah. Given that you've got the character position as well, why not highlight the character?
The thing is that I haven't updated that yet in the, sorry, the question was, given that I have the character position, why I don't highlight just that one? The answer is that as it is built right now, we can call Visual Studio Instance with goToLine, and I have to very deep down inside the SDK to figure out how to highlight the single character. But once I figure that method, I'll definitely call that as well. Okay, so is it coming on the screen? It is. Before we conclude with the session, I wanted to talk about a few pros and cons of Roslyn. You have seen the power, what I can do with it, because I have a parser and lexer there. And the great thing that I'm looking forward to is that I'll be able to apply those changes straight away to your code without caring about how will you fix it. I can do it for you now. The great thing is that now I have something that's accurate. I didn't have that before, and I'm really happy with that. And I can use it in my standalone product. That's something I'm really happy about. But there are still problems. It's still in beta. Don't ask me how difficult it is to see that something is working, and then you update the NuGet package, and then you see, oh, it's not working anymore. So as long as this is in beta, you cannot rely on anything and say, yeah, I can use it, and then I'll come back after 2 months and see, yeah, it's still working again. It's not. But the good thing is that it's in beta 1.0. Before it was 0.7 or something like that, which makes me feel like RC is just around the corner. One thing that I'm not so happy about is that there is no support for HTML, JavaScript, and other languages. I was trying to convince Anders to build that in. He gave me a good explanation why, that there are so many things that we have to look about if he wants to build that in, and there is a simple no. Scripting was one of the great things that was in Roslyn, which allowed me to just write some small snippets like var x equals 10 and compile that and put it in my application, and that would sit there in the context. And that's gone now. I have to compile the snippets. That's why my code is so complex when I build the rules. And one great thing is that they don't have any documentation, or almost none, which makes me look around the web and find how things work and use the syntax visualizer to see how Roslyn understands the code.
So that's your next book, is it? You publish.
In my, so the comment was, if that's in my next book when I'm publishing it, well, I don't have time to write any books, and I'm pretty sure that somebody else will do that. But I'm hoping that Microsoft will publish the documentation as soon as Visual Studio 2015 is out. So far, I think, well, I believe that the Roslyn now is pretty much done. There might be fixing just a few bugs, but Roslyn is pretty much done. And now that they can focus on building the documentation. Okay, something that was really cool at the MVP Summit is that we had a Roslyn hackathon, and that's non-related to my session. My session was about how to bring Roslyn in standalone product. Now this is how to build analyzers in Visual Studio. And at the Roslyn hackathon, those guys have built quite a few nice analyzers. I'm not talking about them, but if you want to have a look, go on GitHub and check the .NET analyzers, and you can use them with Visual Studio 2015 if you want to. There were quite a lot of good things, so go for it and give it a try. Okay, my session is almost over, so let's have a look at what we have learned in this session. We have seen the old application, what I did with the new one, and what I'm planning to do in the future. I believe you all have seen how great Roslyn can be if you know how to use it. There was a glimpse of how you can extend Code Auditor, and I believe that was a bit difficult for everyone. It's a bit difficult, I believe, for other guys who have seen the code before. Julian, I don't know how difficult it was for you, but I believe that for others it was quite mind-blowing. And, well, there were some hot tips like how you can isolate things in app domain and stuff like that. With that, I think I smell the pizza. Adam, is that right?
Yep, as soon as we get the emails done.
Okay. So, guys, you have to deserve your pizza.
Are you taking questions or no?
Well, questions are there, of course, but first I'd like to conclude the session, and then we can go on and chat about it. So, thank you for joining me here, and let's take questions offline.
Okay, you don't want to take them online? We've got time.
Do we? Yeah, okay, that's fine.
What's the roadmap for the product?
I have no idea. That's the most honest answer I can give you. There are a lot of things that are on the backlog. You could check them on roslyn.codeplex.com, but I don't have any details.
I think I can jump in and say the main one is the sharing of rules. That's the main item on the backlog coming up.
I think his question was, what's the roadmap of
Roslyn? Clear
Roslyn?
roadmap for the product, like
Are you talking about Roslyn or Code Auditor?
Code Auditor.
Oh, then I misunderstood the question. Yeah, there are a lot of things on the backlog. Yeah, one idea is to put it on the web and allow you to share the rules among different companies or different level of organization or with friends. That's something we'd really like to do. But my big dream is that Code Auditor will once be running on the server side, scanning all different solutions, even Java and PHP, when you kick off the build. And that dream is not too far away. Microsoft is doing something really great. And I hope that I'll be able to plug my solution in. And
yeah, another question is, how are you going to achieve the testability of the rules that you're written in Roslyn?
Well, that's a tricky one.
Yeah, because remember we had before we test the
Yeah.
regex. So
Yeah.
are you going to have something similar for Roslyn? Like,
Well, certainly I can compile that, but I cannot say if the rule is working or not. So that's the big deal, because I would have to. Well, what I could do, I could give you a dummy file, or allow you to upload a dummy file and say, I want to test this against this file, whether it works or not, and then just compile the snippets, and that's one way of doing it. Yeah. Oh, there we have a guy in the back. Yeah.
How does Roslyn
Hold on. I've got to use the mics. I know it's a bit late, but there's more people online than there are in the room.
I was just going to ask, how does Roslyn compare to Code DOM?
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, it's supposed to be way faster. But in theory, Roslyn is not just a code DOM. So code DOM is just one thing, and we could compare it to syntax tree. Roslyn is way bigger. It gives you a compiler, it gives you options to do refactorings in Visual Studio, you get workspaces, so it's a completely different thing. Roslyn is massive. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Dave, any questions from you?
Not that long.
Apart from code analysis, what could you use Roslyn for?
That's another good question. If you're not doing it, there is no point. Roslyn was primarily built for C# and VB, so that they get rid of those. We have something, we have something. And this is the case where I can use Roslyn to do code analysis outside Visual Studio, but I haven't come across something where I could use it elsewhere.
I might just jump in. It is likely you'll see people allow extensions to their business applications where you have simple bits of logic written. Workflow rules.
That could be a case, yeah.
So there'll be, I think you can do a lot more than just use it in a developer manner, you know.
As soon as they bring the scripts engine in, again. But right now it's a bit complex to do it.
How heavy is this in terms of, if you want to just say at a mathematical or lexical parsing of something and you're going to use this, is this like a massive amount in addition to your application?
What do you mean by massive math?
Like the amount of DLLs and the number of bytes that you're adding to your code, is this really huge or is this fairly lightweight?
I can give you the exact answer if I'm going here. I haven't remembered the yeah, we will.
See, and what I'm thinking of is we used to have the VBA engine that we could plug in and start to enhance an application. This looks like something that you could insert in as part of an app rather than
let's see how big
be
that is now.
subservient to it.
Microsoft Code Analysis. Let me sort by type first. Those are the assemblies. I think it brought them all, so it's 12 extra megs. I think they're all in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it could be a VBA runtime thing.
Pretty much. I mean, in my case, the size doubled. That's why I wasn't really happy with, but...
All right, so
do we have a question online?
Oh, okay. We have a question. Great presentation. Can you analyze other languages? How easy would it be to extend to another language like C or Pascal?
My question to that is you can't. And, well, you can extend it as long as you build your own lexer and parser for C or C++, which might take quite a long time. But there is an option to do so. Roslyn is open source, which means that you can go to Codeplex, download it, precompile it, do whatever you want with it. You can even extend it for C# or VB. I remember there was an example on Build 2014 when Anders used French quotes for strings, string literals. So that's something you can do, but by default, you don't get anything like that.
Okay, so if there's no more questions, thank you very much, Daniel, for putting this presentation together, and we'll see you over at the pub.
Okay.
Did you get all that? We'll take the SSW TV quiz and test your knowledge now.